Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. We have today with us Alexis Datta. She is a new loan officer with Absolute Home Mortgage and possibly one of the youngest loan officers that we've seen in a long time. So I wanted to have her today on the podcast and talk a little bit about, why she got into the mortgage industry, her view on it, what's her current status with like learning the industry, absorbing it, understanding the sales role, and then also I think what I would like to kind of get into a little bit also is your background, right, and how I think you're one very unique, as you and I have talked about in the past, coming into an industry that from a demographic perspective is kind of on the older side at this point. We haven't had much younger talent come into the mortgage and financial side of the house. So, kind of interested to know where, one, what got you interested in it to make the leap, but then also kind of your background that may have fed into that.
Yeah.
So let's kind of get just started. Tell me a little bit about growing up. Obviously I know we have a bit of a personal relationship through your parents, and I've worked with them in the past. Your dad owns a mortgage company as well in the Maryland area. So I'm sure you have a lot of exposure to the business from that side. But, give me a little bit about your background growing up. What do you got?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I guess I grew up in Maryland, as you know, and my parents were involved in the industry from probably when I was 4 or 5 is when they started the company.
Okay.
And so I've been hearing about it since then. And I started right out of high school in the financial space, I guess. I studied finance in college.
Okay.
And I knew that was something that I wanted to pursue just because of having that exposure and being around it.
So from a school perspective, I don't say most, though. There's a lot of people in our industry who haven't found the need for school, right? So it's typically, it's more of that sales role. They kind of fell into it. Classic finance background doesn't always play into it, right?
Right.
But I think one part of your story that kind of intrigued me is you graduated high school at 15. 16, sorry.
Sorry.
Graduated college at 19, right?
20.
NYU. 20, I'm a year off.
Yeah, it's a year off.
Okay. So, and then went for your master's in accounting?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, I did my bachelor's and master's at the same time.
Okay. And no desire to go into like the accounting side?
I did some experimenting in college of trying different roles, and it was kind of a process of elimination, if you will. And I did a little bit of work in a few accounting firms, and I realized that it was fun, it just wasn't my passion. And so I went more of the finance route because accounting is really the backbone anyway. So.
And that's where you ended up in Morgan Stanley for a few years after college.
Yeah.
Was it like a full-time role, intern role? What were you doing there?
So I started as an intern my junior summer of college, and then I joined the firm full-time on the investment banking side.
Gotcha. And then your dad talked you into coming over to the mortgage side.
Yeah, basically.
Kicking and screaming.
Basically, yes. We had a lot of conversations about, where I saw myself and my interest in the real estate industry, sure. And it was kind of a natural next step.
Yeah. No, it's I think interesting. One, if you have that charismatic side to get into the sales role, right? It can be one, very lucrative, two, give you flexibility and give you a lot of room to grow, right? It's not capped, right? It's a sales, but then it probably plays to that finance background slightly too, right? Where you start seeing, okay, this is how this ties back, and thinking a little bit more into the actual mechanics of selling and buying and trading of mortgages.
Right. Yeah. And I started on the debt side as well when I first left college, just on the corporate debt side. And so it's kind of full circle for me because I get to work with debt still, and I'm still working with mortgages. It's just residential now.
What is the corporate debt side like?
It's a lot of bonds. We were doing like investment grade issuance for like utility companies like Con Ed, and I'm sure there's one in New Jersey that I'm forgetting,
There's
but
a few, yeah.
there's a few, and oil and gas companies.
That's cool. Okay. So I mean, I'm sure in concept it's debt, right? But
Yeah,
it's a different world, I'm sure.
It's very different, but it feels full circle just conceptually.
Yeah. So growing up, did your, like, dad ever talk to you guys about coming into the mortgage business? Was there, like, were you interning at his office? Like, what exposure did you have growing up?
Yeah, so I have two sisters, as you know, and neither of them really expressed any interest in the finance side, so it was really targeted at me. But we did work in his office for summers, a few years, like in middle school and the beginning of high school. So very early, we got some exposure, which was nice. And then from then, we started talking about what's next. Do I need some corporate exposure? Should I learn, what it's like to work in a company that's not my parents' company,
Yes.
Before coming back?
Yeah,
and,
a little less nepotism.
exactly. And earning your way.
Yes.
And proving yourself before you.
I mean, from what I know about your dad, he doesn't seem to give anything away for free. So
No.
he's putting you to work, I'm sure, pretty hard at that point. And
Yeah, and I mean, it's just better to learn that way. It's, instead of being
100%.
handed everything. So.
Yeah. 'Cause I think this business, the mortgage business itself, is difficult to break into.
Right.
Like, you have to have a certain work ethic to, especially from the sales side. I mean, I think operationally you can get involved and have a role and build and learn and excel. But if you want to break into the sales side, it is a bit of a closed circle, right? And you're trying to get in, whether it's through referral sources or, calling leads, however you decide to carve that apple. But like, how do you kind of find that path that makes sense for you? Like, obviously your demographic is going to handle things a little bit different than, somebody who's been in the business for 30 or 40 years, has been through a couple of downturns, is used to taking a paper 1003 and, doesn't want to necessarily embrace technology. Your age group and yourself can kind of leverage a lot more from the technology and the tool side, right?
Yes, certainly. I think it also comes with, you have to be okay. I think most jobs, you have an input and a recognizable output, whereas this one, it's a little bit delayed, which we've discussed.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be okay with that in your work ethic as well, because you're going to keep putting in, and you might not see something coming out.
Yeah, I mean, sales in general, you don't have that instant gratification, right? I think there's a couple different ways that I see people coming into our business where it's, you're working underneath somebody, or somebody's, mentoring you or handing your leads. I know you're taking a little bit of a different approach where you're just, jumping in 2 feet right into the fire.
Right.
But, there's not that appeal for the younger generation to like walk through that open door unless somebody is luring them in with money and mentorship and a future, right? Which is great, but they become dependent as well, right? Like, we see it a lot where somebody's that loan officer assistant and they don't end up going on their own at any point. Right. Where I think the idea is to build loan officers, right? Get comfortable with the business, understand how to structure, understand, what compliance is. And at least when I came into the business, like I was sitting cold calling leads, but from day one, I did everything on my own. Right. I we didn't even have a processor at my office. Like,
oh, wow.
We were the processors. It was a broker shop, so it was a little bit easier. But, we understood DU, we understood compliance, we sent disclosures. Like, we did all of this stuff.
Right.
So I think it's a different, you come in, you have some resources, which is nice, but what does it take to kind of, from your side coming in saying, hey, there's a little bit of a different view now where we can say, how does it look to come in from your demographic, right? From your age group, saying, how can we attract more of that, right? Because that's not common. It's just we've made it hard to come in. We haven't given the tools to coach it up necessarily.
Right.
And there are like coaches, there's people who try to build, but like it's a lot of go out and find the business.
Yes, exactly.
It's a lot of it, right?
Right.
And most of it is just the hard work of going out and building relationships or calling leads or like pure boots on the ground type action.
Yeah. And I mean, I think my demographic and my age group is really, there are a couple of elements about the industry that are really appealing, right? You know, the entrepreneurial aspect and, you know, being able to make your own schedule and having some more flexibility. I think all of that is appealing. But I think that on the flip side, you do get the whole, you know, the common phrasing of like high risk, high reward has changed to be, instead of high risk, high reward, it's high risk, high instant reward. And without that, it's very difficult for us to see, I think, the next steps, right?
There's no click, right? There's no like, I guess using the social media analogy, like there's no likes, right? You don't know whether or not there could be a future because you're not getting like, hey, my likes are building now. I'm going to eventually get a reward from that, right? It's nothing. Oh, I got one, right?
Exactly.
It's almost like fishing.
Yes, it is. I mean, I remember the first week that I started doing cold calls. On day 2, nothing had happened. And I remember calling my dad and being like, I don't think I'm going to make it in this industry. He was like, it's been 2 days. How many people have you called? You know, and not necessarily saying that that's really the only avenue, because obviously there are so many other things that you can do.
Yeah, there's other avenues.
It's, you know, it's definitely a very common way of thinking for us.
Yeah, I mean, our business was built on phone solicitation, mail solicitation, right? It's definitely shifted a lot towards like internet style leads.
Yeah.
It's hyper competitive.
Yeah.
And there's just too many people trying to go after the same business. So trying to be more organic about it, right? And about your origination is, I think, important, right? Because that builds a book of business. It's not transaction based at that point.
Right.
So where do you kind of see your next 6 months of trying to, continue to build that book of business, find more referral sources, and I know you're doing the phone solicitation and trying that. Like, have you thought about anything else? Have you been researching? Obviously, looking at social media, looking at just I want to call it knocking on doors, but going to broker opens, introducing yourself, and doing going down that avenue.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think social media is such a huge element of marketing nowadays for anyone, regardless of whether you're marketing yourself or a company. And so it's an avenue you kind of have to pursue, I think.
I mean, you have very little social media presence because I tried stalking you out to prepare for this.
I have 2 pictures on my Instagram, and I only started that because I was realizing that because everyone is moving towards social media, you lose contact with people that otherwise you would keep in contact with. And because it helps you to really keep your network large, right?
It's a numbers game.
It's a numbers game, yeah. So no, I'm not great at it, I would say personally, but I think that it's silly to not leverage it or to try, because it's not really an industry where people know that much about business,
and it's free advertisement.
Exactly.
Essentially. I struggle with mortgages are boring. Right? Like in my head, I'm just like, it's a very difficult, we have our marketing team at Absolute. We talk about all how do we market the brand, right? It's difficult because it's boring, right? It's not something that we find to be like, hey, check out this exciting. It's a lot of business to business marketing. It's it's difficult to go client direct or consumer direct, from a social media standpoint. But what has worked for a lot of people is just marketing themselves, right? trying to get into their demographic, trying to understand what makes their circle larger, right? And it's not so much like I have to go after these realtors. Like, no, like find the realtors that can relate to you, right? And in your area, or even reaching out further, like it will expand, but you have to start somewhere. But I think that's where social media is more powerful than just like putting a post about a product that you offer.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I don't know if like the reach is there. I think and I could be completely wrong. I'm not a marketing expert in any way, but from what I don't follow like mortgage people unless their personal content is cool, right? And I think that's what social media thrives at, is letting people market themselves when they're, they have a unique perspective.
I think so. I mean, I think from the consumer perspective, no one's really interested, or, it's not their job to be knowledgeable about these products, right? That's why you have a mortgage person in the first place. And so I think that if I were to look for someone to help me in the mortgage space, I would be looking for someone that felt more humanized, as opposed to someone who had, products up the wazoo and had the best rates and everything. I think that obviously those things are important, right? But someone who is willing to work with you to get there is way more important.
It's a lot. I think that's one of the misconceptions, is one, helping navigate. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of borrowers that would come in and just like, they know what they need. They're just like, I want a 30-year fix, this product, like somehow they know what. And there's vehicles for them, right? And those are the easy borrowers. Just say, okay, yeah, sure, here's my rate, right? We're competitive, great. And then you have the newly married couple buying their first house, super stressful. They're trying to move out. They have to do everything on the same day.
Yeah.
Their lease is coming up and their hair's on fire. They don't know where to start.
Yes.
That's where like a real loan officer can come into play and set expectations and help navigate. Typical to like what a realtor is supposed to do, right? But then we were able to step in and guide them through it. And then looking at other financial decisions, refinancing, construction of property, reverse mortgages for later in life. Like we continue down that path where it's not like one transaction, buy or sell and call it a day. Like now we can be your partner for life. Right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that the industry has changed in a way that those borrowers who know what they want, right, are coming into the industry as probably seasoned borrowers, have online platforms where they don't have to talk to anyone, whereas you come to a shop that's a little bit more high touch because you don't want to be, maybe for lack of better term, paralyzed by choice, and still find the best solution.
So I'm on the brink of that demographic to where we don't want to talk to people anymore, but you're in it pretty heavily.
Yeah.
Right. So like the younger clients that I work with will often like just text me, go online, upload doc. Like I think have like one conversation with them, and it's because I'm forcing them. I'm like, I can't text this. It's too long. Please call me. So like, how do we navigate that? Right. Is because there's a fine line between, you can still be high touch, high service in a digital world.
Yes.
Right. And I think some people don't realize that. Like, I don't think me texting back and forth with my clients and guiding them through it and sending emails and, them using my portal to upload and put their app, like, I still feel like I'm super engaged, right? I don't need to talk to them 5 times a day. I don't have to have a meeting with them every other week to go over their status. My technology does that for me, right? But it's certainly different than somebody who I think right now it's probably in that mid 30s to mid 50s range that like is somewhere in the middle. Right. Where, hey, they need to get somebody on the phone when they need to get somebody on the phone, but then like they're still texting and emailing.
Yeah.
And so it does change a little bit where your demographic, as you're coming in, you're gonna have to adapt to that. Right. And say, hey, we're going so much more digital, a lot less traditional high touch, but we're still giving the feedback somehow.
Right.
And they are more educated, right? I mean, you search mortgages on TikTok, you'll find a lot of information.
That's
I don't know
true.
how much of it's good, but there's some out there.
Right.
We hear about products all the time that way. Like somebody will be like, "Hey, look at this like TikTok that this person did,"
Yeah.
and you're just like, "Okay, we'll try to find
We'll look at it.
yeah, we'll take a look." And it's some wacko product that some bank came out with, and you're like, "Yeah, that's pretty interesting, right?" So it's definitely tools in the tool belt, and I think that's what I found works good these days is not putting yourself in a box. Right.
I think so. I mean, I'm definitely, you saw my social media, I'm definitely not the best judge of this because I'm probably in like that 50 plus category where I would want to be on the phone all the time. But I think that in the same breath, I will say that if there's a bad user interface, for example, like you're on the tech side, you know that if that application isn't easy to use, no one wants to do it, right? The trust in the company just goes down at that point, which
very
is
quickly.
which is such a huge change that something as simple as how a page looks, right, can change your mind on using a specific company. But I agree with that, right? Because then it's like, it's almost as if it's synonymous with the amount of care you put into speaking to the borrower instead.
It's all very subjective too, right? It's all like, what does that individual feel is the correct interface, right? Everybody's got an opinion. It's wild. It's, especially on the tech side with our tech company, when I get these opinions, I'm like, we've had 5 people tell us that they absolutely needed to see it a certain way, and they're all different. Right. So which one's right? And is there a right? But I think right in Northern New York is different than right in Miami. Right. And it's different than right in California.
Very true. Yeah.
It's just a reality, and we have to figure out how to adapt to that. Yeah. And that's where you have to be a little bit of a chameleon in this business. And if you want to spread out, you'll see a lot of people that are hyper localized. I don't know if that's always the best strategy, but it works for some people. Yeah. Fortunately, we don't have to be anymore, right? We can have a much greater reach. It's just relating to the reach is the hard part. Right. I mean, getting back a little bit into, your childhood, you moved up from, Maryland to New York, suburbs, small town suburbs, right? Sort of small town, to New York City. A little bit of a culture shock, I'm guessing.
Very big.
Saw some weird stuff.
Still see a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. So, do you see yourself doing more business in like someplace like New York, or do you like the more suburb relationship based? Because New York's going to be 100% more transactional, right? Where you start building relationships in suburbs like Maryland, Delaware, Jersey, like you'll see a little bit of a different market.
Yeah, and I know it's kind of a non-answer, but I feel because I spent so much time in Maryland. I mean, I was there until I was 16. We grew up in one community. It was a very small town. Yeah. And then I moved to New York, and I've been here for the last 8 years, and so I feel like I have enough experience in both markets that I'm okay with the transactional because I deal with it every day, but also I really like the relationship aspect of it. And so honestly, probably both, because I think it's refreshing when you're doing a lot of transactional work to have one relationship and then, do a lot of relationship work, and it's nice to have the transactional. So it's a good mix, I would say.
So you're the youngest of 3?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
By like a few minutes?
15.
15 minutes. That's close. Yeah. So you have a twin sister and then older sister. Yes. So everybody's, except your twin, has gravitated to the New York area, right? So you and your older sister gravitated to New York area. Yeah. And your other sister's in the Air Force. Yes. And hasn't really landed anywhere yet.
We tried.
We for lack, tried. No pun intended, landed anywhere. Yeah. But, yeah. So she's flying planes for the Air Force, right? You have your pilot license also, or went for it, or did training?
I did. Because I left Maryland when I was 16. I've gotten up to the solo stage, and then from there I had to stop because there wasn't anything in New York.
So I'm guessing you and your sister were doing this simultaneously,
Yeah.
and I remember your dad showing me pictures of you guys flying. Um, and she just kind of took it and ran with it. Was it always her thing to go in the Air Force?
It was always her thing.
Okay.
It's a twins thing that when you're growing up, if one of them wants to do it, the other one
That's
also
that's
just
what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Like, how did you deviate? Because it sounds
That's
like you
how.
guys were both like, you were just like, all right, twinsies are done.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Well, actually, it started at college, right? We knew that we wanted to study different things. She's always been very gung-ho Air Force. She's known always that that's her thing. Whereas I took a little bit longer to decide on. Actually, I think it was 6th grade. I was talking to my dad. I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And he said, you should go into finance. And I said, okay. And I think that was it from there.
I don't think most kids in 6th grade aren't sure what to put, like clothes to put on. So figuring out that you wanted to go into finance
Right.
is very interesting.
Yeah, and well, I think that it probably just lodged somewhere in my brain, and then, when people started asking me in high school, I was like, finance, probably. I don't know. But we knew that we wanted to go in different directions, and so come college, we actually got into the same colleges, and we decided to go to 2 different ones just because hers was better for the Air Force, mine was better for finance, and we just made
So
a split.
you went to NYU, your sister went to
University of Maryland,
University of Maryland, and your other sister?
Columbia.
Columbia.
Yeah.
So that's how you gravitated up to the New York area.
Yeah.
Did you know you wanted to be in the New York area?
I didn't. I honestly, I had really no idea.
It's like one visit to New York, you're just like, yeah, it's probably a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, we did the tour at NYU, and I remember that day it was raining, and then I fell into a pothole in Washington Square Park.
Yeah.
And after that, I was like, I'm never coming here. I hate this place. And then lo and behold, I ended up there.
I mean, that's how I feel every time I go into New York. I'm just like, yeah, I hate this place, but then you somehow end up back there for food or
Yeah.
for something. Like it's an amazing city, but at the same time, it's like you look around. Last 2 years have gone very concerning.
Right.
It feels like it's made a bit of a negative shift, but it's still one of those places that like it just has a weird allure to it.
Yeah.
Right, you're just like, you don't understand why you like it.
You just like it, yeah.
You're just there, right?
Yeah.
And or like, you talk and you're like, oh, we should go to the city. Like, yeah, it's a bad idea.
Yeah, I think, especially coming from a suburb, and this is always what I say about the city, when I first got there, it was such a huge culture shock, and honestly, I hated it. I just flat out hated it. I wanted to leave immediately, and it's because you go from a place where you know a lot of people, you feel comfortable, and then you end up in this area where no one really cares that you're there,
Yeah.
you have friends and you have maybe family members. I was
like,
lucky in that. But besides those people, no one cares.
And
it
everybody's
seems.
doing 900 miles an hour,
Exactly.
right? Like, it's
Yeah.
like,
But then if you slow down, you realize that, it's not such a bad thing, because you can really be yourself. The city allows you to be yourself in a very unique way, I
Yes.
think, because everyone is just themselves,
Just-
It's- yeah,
not
if you
always the
look-
best version of
not
themselves,
always the best version. But it gives you that sort of latitude.
Sure.
And also, it's just that people in the city are very nice. It's just we mind our own business.
that's very questionable.
Yeah.
But
I we give directions,
yeah,
It's just we won't smile when we're giving them.
I don't know. Every time I go into the city, I always say like I hate coming into the city when it's like the traffic or whatever it is, and I can never see myself living there. But I fully understand the allure of living there,
Yeah.
right? And like, how nice would it be to get up at 2:00 in the morning, want to go downstairs and get food, and there's food everywhere, right? Like it's like
great.
it's just this weird. I don't want to use the word utopia because it doesn't feel like that anymore. But it's like this weird.
Maybe.
It's like a weird world
Yeah.
of. I actually said to my wife the other day, I was like, I feel like I'm in like a simulation in here. Just people running around 900 miles an hour. Like everybody's got drive to go do something that, like, I'm like, where are you going in a rush, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's in a rush,
Yeah.
and but people love it.
It's really motivating, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone is there for a reason, it seems, even if they're not.
Yeah.
So they're on the path to something, and it really is inspiring for you to be on your own path to something, right? Regardless of what that is. And there's just, I mean, there's so much creative talent in the city everywhere you
There
look.
is.
So,
I mean, I there's definitely like parts of living in New York that, I mean, I'm a 200-pound male, so like I feel like I can have a little bit of control over things, but like I don't know if I'd want like my daughters walking around the city, right?
yeah.
So like I'm sure there's that aspect of it for everybody, you know, where it just doesn't always feel safe.
Yes.
But like from a numbers perspective, it's not so bad.
Right.
Right.
And I mean, my parents definitely struggled with that, right? It was better that two of us were there than just one of us. But I remember when Nikki, my older sister,
Kicked
went
you
off to
out.
college.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, besides that, but when she went off to college, I mean, it was, you know, it was such a huge change because every night we have Life 360.
Yes.
And so every night we were looking at location, and if she wasn't picking up, we were freaking out. And, you know, my dad has called the police on her once to see where she was, of course. But I mean, I think that it makes you more aware of your surroundings, right? Because you're aware of that.
It's a life lesson living in the city,
Yeah.
for sure. Do you see yourself living there long term?
You know, I'm not sure. I haven't hit the point where I think some people hit a point in the city where they're like, I have to get out of here. And I haven't hit that yet, so we'll see.
Yeah. Do you want to kind of cultivate business in the city? Is that where
Certainly. Yeah.
you're trying to expand?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know the areas very well at this point. And so I feel that I have definitely some interest and some experience to work in the city.
And I mean, from the creative side, you've always, from my understanding, talking to your mother, you've always been pretty creative, right? Like whether it's cooking, traveling, like, you know, just doing things that are lean towards that more creative side of your brain, right?
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, was that a draw to the city for you?
It was. I think NYU itself is just a huge hub of creative, you know, creative output, which was very cool for me. And it's definitely weird because I studied finance.
I was going to say, like, finance is very binary, right? It's not as free-willed as being in one of, like, a creative arts is, right? Being in finance is like, no, this is math is math,
right? Or wrong, right? Yeah, it is very binary. But I feel like, especially being in an industry such as ours, it allows you a little bit more of a creative outlet, right? Because not only is it the sales aspect and how you decide to approach the sales aspect, but it's also a lot of problem solving, which I think a lot of people don't. It doesn't strike people as creative, right? But I mean, it kind of is, at least to me, where you have to find creative solutions to
everything.
Financing problems, everything, right? It might be numbers, but there are ways to move around the numbers that, you know, form a prettier picture, if you will, than others.
Have you always been a problem solver?
I like to think so, but you spoke to my mom more recently. She would tell you.
I mean, she always, every conversation I've ever had with your mother, they've always talked very highly of you and your siblings.
Good.
You know, she would often tell me how, you know, somebody's arguing with this person, or there's like a little bit of sisterly love going on.
Yeah.
And I see that with my own daughters. So like we used to laugh about it because I'd be on a call with your mom, and we're like going through some stuff, and she would hear like my girls arguing with each other, and you know, she'd be like, oh, I missed that.
Yeah.
I'm like, do you though?
Yeah, now we fight where she can't hear us.
Yeah, so she did tell me that you were the one that would usually win the fights or manipulate them to make it so you won the fights.
Yeah, well, Nikki trained me well. That's why. That's always what I say. It wasn't of my own volition. It was Nikki.
In terms of like letting you win?
No, teaching me how to manipulate them.
How to manipulate them.
Yes, I mean she was the odd one out of the twin. You know, there was two of us. We were always together, and so
would you guys team up on her?
We would team up on her all the time, and so she really had to learn. And also, she felt very lonely a lot of the time.
Is everybody pretty close?
Yeah, now
Okay.
we're all three.
No,
very
in
close.
terms of age-wise, like
Yes.
Nikki's how old?
She's 2 years older than us, so she's
Okay, so
26.
everybody's close. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Very close, but she would feel left out, and
You
so
guys
she
box her
learned
out.
how to, weasel her way in.
got it. Yeah, I mean, that's a life lesson for sure.
Yeah.
And I think we were talking about it the other day that your dad would not ever let you win in chess.
Yeah, yeah. We used to play chess every Sunday, and it was a lot of fun for sure. But he would taunt me while we were playing the game, which was the worst part because I never wanted him to let me win, right? Because I was not good enough at the game to beat him. But he would make fun of me while we were playing, and then I would lose, and then I would cry, and then we would come back and repeat every Sunday until eventually, I don't remember what age I was, I think maybe 10 or 11, when I finally beat him.
Like a legit win.
A legit win, yes. And at that point, I had gotten so used to the taunting that I just tuned it out.
And did you give it back to him at that point?
No, no, I didn't.
Have you guys played since you lost?
I think we've played once, but really he lost interest after
Yeah.
I won. I think his goal was to get me to beat him, and then he was done.
People give me like crap all the time because I like when I'm doing things with my daughters, like I just don't usually let them win.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like not about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you want to play tug of war, you're gonna lose,
Yeah.
right? You want to like we're running a foot race, like I'm gonna catch you.
Yeah.
So I totally get where your dad's coming from.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it definitely teaches resilience, I think. But maybe if you start making fun of your daughters while that's
Pretty
happening,
rough,
they'll
yeah.
also be emotionally resilient.
I can't. The life lesson that teaches. I mean, I commend you for not being as active on social media. Like social media scares me for just that reason.
Yeah.
With the kids, like my kids, I'm just like I being socially resilient to, like, some keyboard warrior saying, "Hey, you're this. Hey, you're that. This post sucks." Like, that's you have to be so calloused that like I don't know how to teach my kids any other way than literally being tough on them in certain situations.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think I think even from when I was growing up and being on social media, it's very different from being on social media as a kid, especially as a young girl right now.
Yeah.
I think it's worlds apart. And honestly, I would tell you that I don't even know if I was prepared for that as a result, right? Just if we're being a little bit more serious about it, I think that you have to be on social media to sort of form
Get
that
that
resilience,
dynamic.
because you're just so shocked. Like in person, it's way different, because people are held accountable to what they say,
Yes.
right? Whereas over the internet, no one is held accountable. You just
There's no
can't hold
accountability.
accountable.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people say things.
That they would never say to somebody
Exactly.
in person, 100%. And I mean, listen, social media definitely scares me. I think it has a place, but it's super scary.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people that are emotionally unstable, and that one exasperates the issue if they are not emotionally stable enough to deal with it. But then there's also the other side of it where people are emotionally unstable and are dragging other people down with them,
Right.
because they are stuck in their mother's basement, tied to a laptop, eating Oreos and just calling people fat.
Right.
Right. So, like, I don't know if there's a way to police that or a way to prepare people for that.
Yeah.
But the kids, like my kids, are going to be in it full boat at some point,
Right.
and they're going to have to understand that.
Yeah, I think it's tough as a parent also. I mean, it's one of the biggest reasons I was never on social media, because I never wanted to give myself an excuse to crave that approval. I wanted any of that approval to be, any approval that I needed to be either from myself or from people that I actually spoke to face to face,
I mean, I noticed that like with myself, even sometimes, like I'll post something and I'll like go check and I'm like, why am I even checking this? Right. Yeah. Like, I really don't care. Like I like to post it because like I like to post once in a while because I I'm proud of whatever the moment was.
Yeah.
Typically that's 100% it is, or, it's a great picture of the girls. And, but like, there's like a weird side of you that the dopamine hit of like, did I get a like? Did I get a like? Did I get a like? Like, I don't know how they fix that in social media, but it's either that or as a culture, we become immune to it.
Yeah.
Right. At some point, or it's going to be the downfall of our culture is that like constant dopamine hit.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it goes back to the topic of instant gratification, right? You post a picture and you get a bunch of, it's the same way that your Amazon package comes in 2 days, you know,
Yeah.
and you need it right now. And now if you're ordering something online and it's going to come in a week, you're like, what happened?
What happened?
Why?
Yeah, it's broken.
Why can't you get it to me tomorrow? You know, whereas in reality, I mean, that's just how life used to work.
I was like looking at ordering something the other day, and it like popped in my head that I needed something. So I jumped on and I ordered it. And in my head, I'm thinking, how did we get here? Right?
Yeah.
Like I would have had to like wait until I could get to a store. By the way, I don't even know what store would sell this.
Yeah.
Like, where would I have found this 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Right? We're not that far off, right? We're 20, 25 years ago. Like, it was impossible to get some of the stuff that we get in 30 seconds.
Right.
Or we have to go to some specialty store 2.5 hours away.
Yeah.
That's a crazy shift in a very short period of time.
Yeah. And I think that everything is moving sort of in that direction, right? And it's delivery, it's social media, it's just everything we do. We expect to be rewarded for it or to see the output of our actions. And I don't know that you can go back from that because it's in every aspect of your life. How do you forego social media?
I mean, and I think that's kind of my argument a lot with the mortgage business is going way more of that. Why does it take so long?
Right.
Why is the process? One of my kind of withstanding jokes is you can go buy a $200,000 Lamborghini in about 7 minutes.
Yeah.
You can't buy a $50,000 double wide on a plot of land in nowhere, Ohio, for it'll take you a month and a half.
Yeah.
Like, why? Right?
Yeah, I certainly agree with you.
So I think that there's some lessons that are good from that aspect, like to help find some efficiencies and bring cost of lending down and find, but like our minds automatically go there, right?
Yeah.
They go to like, how do we make this faster?
Yeah.
Why is it taking so long? Same thing with our borrowers. Like, can we close in 21 days? Sure.
Yeah.
Like, you want to rush the largest decision you're ever going to make? Like, go ahead, right? You want to forego inspections? You want to that's on you.
Right.
But it seems like everybody's just in a rush.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think it has to be that way, right? I think that we should be finding efficiencies. We should be leveraging technology. We should be doing all this stuff, and we should eliminate the burden of the transaction.
Right.
But it should just be giving people more time to make intelligent decisions.
Yes, and to think about, I mean, it's probably the largest decision that they're
For
going to make
most
financially.
people, it is the financial decision of their life.
Right. And so giving people, I certainly agree, there's a fine line between efficiency, and just being a little bit, trying to satisfy the itch of, I want it now.
Yeah.
And while we should be finding those efficiencies, that time that we save should go towards people thinking more about this decision and being able to be absolutely certain that they're happy with it.
And we find that with like the realtors too, right? Or the referral sources that we deal with. They'll call, hey, we need a pre-approval like right now.
Right.
Right? Okay. Like we can do it. But is that like, does it have to be that way? Should it be that way?
Right.
Right? Do you want the pre-approval to mean something, or do you want it to take some time? Like I have that conversation with my clients all the time. I'm like, hey, I can do like our standard pre-approval, pre-qualification, get through it and give you some, but I could take a little bit longer. We could collect some documents. We could put everything together. I can get it into underwriting, and we'll know that we're good to go.
Right.
And you have all the confidence in the world to go shop, waive mortgage contingencies, do whatever you need to do.
Right.
Right? Especially in today's market, it's super important. You'd be amazed how many people are like, well, can you just do that one for me now? And I'm like, well, do you have an offer to put in tomorrow? No, we're just like looking. Well, then you don't need that one now.
Right.
But like, so let's just go through the process.
Yeah.
Right. And I try to like make them take that deep breath and slow down and walk them through it. But it's oddly conversation that I have too often.
Right.
Is like, hey, I called you at 12. I need my pre-approval by 12:30, and you're just like, you know, do you want it to mean something, or do you want me to print a piece of paper out?
Right.
Because it takes me some time to get through it.
I mean, I think it's also sort of cyclical, if you will, right? Because you're the only one in the process
Right.
that's saying, hey, slow down. We want this to be well-formed. We want you to have time to think about it. And everyone else is saying, we need this right now. Otherwise, we're not considering you. At least that's, I think, what borrowers are thinking at this point, is that if I don't have it right now, I'm never going to get this property. As soon as I see it, I want that paper in hand.
That's like driven a little bit by the hysteria of the market.
Right.
That it's caused this, like, people are making insane bids on houses that they would have never even considered
Right.
3 years ago, 4 years ago, because inventory is tough. They show up at an open house, there's 15, 20, 30 people walking through it
Right.
at any given time. They become panicked about it.
Yeah.
Right? They become panicked. They say, hey, I need to get my offer in today.
Right.
Okay. Like, yes, we will help you do that. Are you sure this is the offer you want to put out? I have to put it, but like, it becomes so emotional.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of them stepping back and saying, hey, is this the right decision for me? And I have those conversations a lot with my clients too. Like, okay, that $150,000, this is what it means to your payment.
Right.
This is what it means to your cash, right? This is what it's going to mean to you long term. Like, are you sure this is the bucket you want to be in? Like, yeah, can I get you approved for it? Sure.
Yeah.
Is it outside of your comfort zone? Probably.
Right.
Right? So make the realistic decision of pulling back, because everything's expensive today.
Yeah.
Right? You're moving into an expensive town. Your kids have to go to daycare or school, right? Like, they want to go to dance or play t-ball or softball or wrestling or karate. Like, this stuff adds up super fast.
Yeah.
And I don't think everybody's gotten to a point today where transactions have become highly emotional.
Right.
And I'm sure you're seeing it as just like talking to individuals saying, hey, how do we take a little bit of a step back here and make sure that these transactions make more viable sense, to be responsible, because that's how we lost our way in 2008, right? I know you were super young then, but in 2008, it became very emotional. Everybody needed every house. They didn't care what it cost. It was just get in.
Right.
We don't want to get back there. So I think it's part of our responsibility to guide them through that.
Right. And I'm curious, so you've been in the business since you were 17.
Yeah.
Right. Have you seen that it's sort of cyclical? Has it changed?
Yeah.
Has this?
I haven't felt the cyclical nature of it. I started in 2007.
Okay. Oh, good timing.
Like, so I came in and it was like the tail end of the good, already turning a little bit bad.
Okay.
Pretty weird market, but I was young and I didn't care really. Like, I was going to school.
Yeah.
I had just started college and I was commuting back and forth to the office.
Okay.
So like between classes, I would go work for a few hours, go back for a class, go back to work.
Oh
like,
my goodness. Okay.
it was like a 10 or 15 minute ride each way. So
Yeah.
I would bounce back and forth, and I didn't feel, I was like just growing up when it was bad.
Right.
Right. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of hard days, but I didn't think it was because it was cyclical.
Okay.
The last cycle was pretty crazy, right? Coming through COVID, being massively busy, like just loans coming out of the woodwork everywhere,
Right.
to the faucet being shut off. I think for us, that was like I'm being on the operations side mostly. I still do sales, obviously, as we're talking about, but my role as chief operating officer, like I'm constantly trying to navigate, whether it be staffing or just workload, and figure out how much can we get through, look at, work with accounting on forecasting. It's super hard when we go from the busiest time we've ever had to like the faucet being shut off
Right.
in weeks, is what it felt like. It's probably realistically like 4 months, but the downturn happened really fast. So I've felt that cycle, right?
Okay.
I wouldn't say that we're on the upswing just yet,
Right.
but it feels a little bit better. I just like stability. Like, and it's not from like a safety standpoint. It's just from I don't care if we're selling 7% rates or 2% rates. I just want the rates to stay where they are,
Right.
so people can make informed decisions.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to for me. When I hear people talking about, there's like this common saying that everybody's like, marry the house, date the rate,
Yeah.
because the rate's not going to be there forever.
Right.
Well, we don't know that. Right. I don't agree with it. Right. I say it's a massive financial decision. It could be 1 year. It could be 10 years. By the way, it could be 30.
Right.
So what are you making the best decision that you could make today
Yeah.
with the information you're giving? And you don't have to be pessimistic about it, but
Realistic. Yeah.
be realistic.
Right.
Right. If you were our parents and bought their first house in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a long time before they were able to refinance those houses.
Right. And those rates were higher than they are now.
And those rates were way higher than
Yeah.
they are now. So does that mean that today's rates should, swing back down? I mean, historically they should, right? But is that going to be a reality? I don't know. The economy would have to be in pretty rough shape for us to see this turn down at this point. So I don't play the cycles. Like I think we have to play the volatility in a way.
Yeah.
And look at that, but the cycles of our business are like 10-year cycles. They're not 2-year cycles. They're, when we were on the downturn of COVID, everybody kept saying, "Oh, it's only going to be a couple of years. It's only going to be 18 months. It'll be 12 months." Like, we're 2 years later. We're still talking about it.
Right.
So I think if you've built your book of business, you manage your business and effectively, right? Like you're constantly looking at it. You're constantly trying to grow it. You're making adjustments where they're needed. You can survive any downturn.
Right.
It's the people who are pumping their chest on the highs, and then when the lows come around, they put their head in the sand.
Right.
Like, we were busting our ass super hard when we were super busy. Like, we were working all kinds of hours. It was crazy, right? And the money was obviously good.
Right.
When things turned down, we worked harder, tried to work smarter, but we're doing 10 times more and for a lot less.
Right.
But we knew we had to do it.
Of course. Yeah.
Right? It wasn't something that you could just be like, okay, I'm going to just like go cower up here in the corner and wait for the business to make a turn.
Right.
That's why there's companies that didn't make it through, is because they were waiting. Oh, it's going to turn around. It's going to turn around. Cycles are historically accurate, but there's no rule book.
Right.
We've never come out of a pandemic with the amount of cash flushed into our environment, inventory where inventory is, the price of houses where prices of houses are, and trying to call it a cycle. It was man-made. Right? We made that loop, because if you look today, we're not far off of where we were in 17 and 18.
Yeah, that's true.
So we caused this bubble. Was that part of the cycle?
It's hard to say, yeah.
It's hard to say.
It's definitely hard to say.
So in my mind, when we talk about it, I'm saying, guys, like, we're just back to business.
Right.
That's really what today is. And our job in the current market, because inventory and because of volatility, is to figure out how to get as much market share as humanly possible. Right? To be competitive, leverage our technology, get our costs to originate down, deliver a better product to our consumer, and march forward. That's it.
Right.
It's pretty simple when you think about it. This business just isn't that hard.
Yeah.
Right? There's a ton of companies out there all creating the same product.
Right.
It's who can do it more efficiently. Who, we're a young, progressive company. We're used to change. We're like, and you're going through it right now yourself. Like you made a large jump from Morgan Stanley to the mortgage business, right? It is a massive change. And yeah, it's not fun, I'm sure, right? And it's something that will be a life lesson for you. But that like lesson of change just doesn't stop now.
Right.
It's like you have to embrace that forever. And there's too many people who don't. There's too many people who are like, hey, I have my notepad. This is how I take my applications. I've done it my whole life this way.
Right.
And they're gonna be like, oh, great idea.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So embracing the change will get you there, right? We'll say, hey, okay, this doesn't work. Let's try something else. This doesn't work. Let's try something else. Not just saying, oh, this doesn't work. I'm going to just keep trying it. I'm going to keep trying it until a detriment, right? I'm not saying throw things out quickly or just keep cycling. I'm saying, like, be okay to pivot when you need to pivot, because that's what the cycles are, right?
Yeah.
It's just pivot here, pivot here, pivot here, and you follow the business around, and that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're feeling it now, right?
Certainly.
So you're feeling that change now.
Yes.
What's the most difficult part for you?
I think that it's a much different risk profile. And it's also because it's more entrepreneurial, just the way that you format yourself kind of is what changed probably the most for me. Going from set hours, I go in, I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm working on, to something that's a little bit more make it what you will.
Sure.
It's a lot of fun. And it definitely leaves a lot of room for me to sort of be myself and try to approach the business as myself. But it also means that I have to put those systems in place that were already there for me in this sort of very contained environment.
Right.
And I think that was the biggest change for sure. But also just the sales role, especially as you're talking about this, because I think on the sales side, it's very easy to think about rates as cyclical and the business following rates as they are. But you have the tech side and the operation side where it doesn't follow like that. No. You still have to be improving regardless, which is what drives that stability. And so, I mean, it's an interesting perspective because when I think about it, I always think about cyclical, right. Rates go up, rates go down,
Yeah. People always buy houses, right? So people come into the market, out of the market, into the market, out of the market.
Right.
That's just when I say, if you're adjusting to the market and you're, actively trying to grow your business, you're not necessarily feeling that cycle.
Right.
Right? Maybe you'll feel a cycle in 4 or 5 years, 7 years, 8 years when the cycle means a little bit more to you because like your book of business is adjusting to that cycle, right? So now you're trying to grow that, but like you're in this like current growth phase, and I think it's just a run at this point, right? Whether it's an up, the market's, no matter what, you're moving up because the market's going down, the market's doing this sideways. It doesn't matter. You have a trajectory that you have to follow,
right?
And I think that's any business really. Like you're starting out, so you're not susceptible to that.
Right.
You're not susceptible to the cycle of the business. You're just trying to learn the business, right? Or trying to grow the business. Yeah. Anything's more than zero. Exactly. Right? So yeah, I mean, it's certainly a change, but I think it's a fun world. Like you have, like you said, the entrepreneurial side of it.
Right.
If you thrive in that environment, the possibilities are just endless.
Right.
Your demographic loves this entrepreneurial, life of things right now. Yeah. Right? I don't know a better word to put around it, but it's a lifestyle, right? And I think that that's amazing, right? One, social media has bred it a bit, right? It's became part of the culture now is this, hey, this entrepreneurial thing is in and it's cool.
Right.
But it's constant problem solving and adjusting and being resilient. Yeah. And I think that's where individuals come into play, right? And like your upbringing and stuff that you did with your dad and your mom and like your sisters, and like really trying to embrace that, and then say, hey, like I can problem solve. Like my whole day is problem solving.
Right.
Literally, it's all I do all day. They make fun of me all day because I'm just dealing with everybody's problems.
Yeah.
So, but I think from a loan officer standpoint, from a operation standpoint, it's what our business is trying to figure out that puzzle piece.
Yeah.
Anything else that you wanted to kind of touch on today?
I think that's it. We covered a really wide breadth of topics.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. This was great. Thank you for spending some time with us. I think we'll definitely do this again soon, and can't wait to follow your journey as you really kind of embark on an interesting, an interesting environment right now,
Yeah.
but then also just with your educational background and your age coming into play, I think you just have like this unique breath of fresh air into the business that has been needed for a long time, right? It will serve you well as you grow.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on here.
No problem. This is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.